Hello my friends, in this live session replay, we take a look at Storyline's new xAPI functionality, which lets us collect very specific data about how people engage with a learning experience. So we collect data about which question answers people select, how long they spend on specific slides, and more. And this is all without writing any code at all. So it does get a little bit technical in places, but if you're new to xAPI, it should definitely give you what you need. And if you want to attend these sessions live and ask questions live and participate in the chat, we do have a 24/7 community space that you can join by going to devlinpeck.community. That's where all of these live sessions take place. So we'll see you there and enjoy this replay. So we'll try to do this without code. We're going to cover some core xAPI concepts and then actually apply Storyline's new xAPI functionality to a project. The link is in the chat, so go ahead and download that Storyline file if you haven't already. And if you're watching this replay on YouTube, I'll have the link in the description as well. All right, and yeah, some of you are very new to xAPI. Some people have been keeping up with the xAPI content for years. So again, we'll make sure there's something for everyone. The main point of xAPI, I guess we should start there, is to track data. I mean, xAPI is like a language that we can all use to be on the same page about data. So it's kind of just like a format or a specification, you can think of it as. And the main structure of an xAPI statement is like actor, verb, object. So Devlin completed the course, or Susie passed the course with a score of 80%. You can add on additional context and details. And again, it's all very clearly outlined in the xAPI spec. We're not going to study that today, but we will look at a basic xAPI statement. So here's the Storyline file we'll be working with. So everyone go ahead and open this up. And also too, just to set some context, like the goal here is I want to show you how to send xAPI statements from a Storyline project without having to code anything custom and without having to upload your project to a learning management system. So you'll be able to do this as a SCORM package. I mean, you'll be able to upload this to the web or to an LMS as either an xAPI or a SCORM package. So we're going to use an approach that works for any of your publishing needs. So let's look at what an xAPI statement actually is, like briefly. Okay, since we're talking about xAPI, it's good to know what we're looking at. And this may look confusing if you're brand new to JSON or to xAPI, but this is a JSON object. So JSON, okay? JSON, it's a JSON object. If you're brand new to this and this looks confusing, you can learn this in literally like 5 minutes or less than 10 minutes. Like I guarantee you, however confusing this looks, you can make sense of it relatively quickly. Again, maybe take on a to-do list or something, you can just look up a YouTube video about JSON. Okay, it's only a few things you need to keep track of: these curly brackets, and then it's key value pairs. So yeah, it stands for JavaScript Object Notation. Again, may look intimidating, but it's really just like yeah, name is Devlin, mailbox is this email address. So not going to dive too deep into it here since many of us may be familiar with this, but just know it's key value pairs, the syntax you can learn in probably 5 minutes with a YouTube video. But we will look at the structure of an xAPI statement because xAPI is built on JSON, which is this format, but xAPI has additional rules on top of that. So notice this first and last curly bracket. This makes up an xAPI statement. Okay, so everything within this first bracket and this last bracket, this is an xAPI statement. This is how all xAPI data gets communicated, is via these statements. Some of these, or each statement needs to include an actor, a verb, and an object. So if it doesn't have one of these pieces, it's not an xAPI statement. It's not going to be valid. So I just want to, again, give some context. So the actor, there are multiple ways we can identify the actor. One of the most common ones is with the name and the email address. Okay, so for each one of these, so for the actor, we need some kind of unique identifier for the actor. If we just had name, it's not going to cut it because two people can have the same name. But one of the ideas here is that email addresses are a unique identifier. Okay, so again, one of the most popular ways to identify an actor is with the email address. So you don't need this name part, but you do need this mbox part. Another popular option is via an account, and we'll look at that once we dive into Storyline. Similarly for verbs, again, you may be wondering why we have this thing that looks like a URL here, but for each verb, we want there to be a unique ID for that verb. And that's how we know this is a unique verb. We should be able to go to a resource and see that verbs with this ID mean this specific thing. It's a way to standardize the vocabulary. Common example is if you say Devlin passed something, am I passing something instead of failing it? Am I like passing a ball to a teammate? We want to use the verb IDs instead of just the verbs in, plain English, because those verbs can carry different meanings. So having an ID like this helps differentiate it. And then same thing for the object. The object, we have an ID to separate or make that object stand out from others. It's a unique identifier for that object. And then we can include a definition where we write in plain English or whatever language we use what the object is. Okay, so that's the object. Let's dive into Storyline now. Okay, so everyone should have this file open. I pinned it at the top of the chat, or it will be beneath the video if you're watching the replay. Once we open it up in Storyline 360 though, let's double click on this first slide. I basically made a very short, very basic 2-question quiz just before this session. So here's a title screen. We get a 1-sentence explanation of xAPI statements, and then we get 2 questions. Which format do xAPI statements adhere to? And a fill-in-the-blank question as well. So in this session, we're going to look at how we can track this data. So we want to collect this data into a learning record store, which is basically a database for xAPI statements. So we'll be able to track exactly which one of these answer choices people select and exactly what people are typing into this box, in addition to some other information from this little mini learning experience. So that's what we'll be doing today. We're looking at how we can get more granular data out of an e-learning project using xAPI statements. Okay, so that's the direction we're headed. And the reason we can do this without code now is because Storyline recently added this feature or added this new trigger where the action is to send an xAPI statement. Okay, so we can look at that. And again, most of you are probably familiar with Storyline. If not, triggers are how we add interactivity to Storyline. So we didn't used to have this send xAPI statement trigger. This is brand new. If we look at this xAPI statement, and you don't have to follow along with this, we're not actually adding a statement to the screen right now. I just want to demo this functionality. So we can send an xAPI statement. Storyline has this nice little part where you can pick a verb. So these are like probably the most common verbs we would want to use when we're sending an xAPI statement. Again, we would say Devlin attempted this thing or Devlin answered this question. We can choose the verb here. But notice when we click on this plus xAPI, when we click on that grayed out part here, now it shows us the xAPI statement. Okay, that's kind of why I opened with this part right here. You notice this looks very familiar here. It lets us actually fill in pieces for this xAPI statement. But does anyone notice something missing from this? So look at the main objects we have. Actor, yes, exactly. So Storyline. So when we go into this xAPI statement editor, it doesn't let us modify the actor in any way. It only has the verb and the object. The reason for that is because when you publish this as an xAPI package and you upload it to a learning management system that accepts xAPI packages, it sends the information about the actor to your file for you. So if that person is logged into the learning management system, this file will already know who the actor is because it gets it from the URL. And the LMS handles all of that for you. The problem is when your LMS does not accept xAPI packages. So again, xAPI is becoming more and more popular. Like the big LMSs should be able to handle an xAPI package, but some of them do not. So in those cases, on release, there wasn't really a good way to add that actor if it wasn't an xAPI package. Yeah, there are ways with SCORM to like use custom code to get that person's name and maybe their email address from the LMS, but it varies from LMS to LMS, and there's not like one super reliable approach, which I guess is why Storyline didn't build that functionality into the tool when they released this. And then also, if you wanted to just publish this like for the web, like on your own website or on Amazon S3 for your portfolio, for example, again, they didn't have a way to address the actor there. Okay, so what prompted today's session is because I saw a couple weeks back, Storyline added a new update where we can set some templates for the actor object. Like it's giving us more control, because if we hard code stuff in here, like it still wasn't working with the previous approach. But now what they did, and again, we're going to do this all together. I'm just setting the stage here. What they did is if we go into the publish screen now, we go to this LMS/LRS panel, we have this report to an external LRS checked, because again, that's where all of your xAPI data will go. If you don't have a learning record store, there's nowhere for your xAPI data. And the whole point of a learning record store is to collect and help you analyze your xAPI data. They go hand in hand. But if we click on this reporting and tracking button, again, you don't have to follow along with this. We will do it together. But now we can go to this LRS panel, and this is what Storyline added in that recent update. You notice the default and the only option we had before was that the actor was supplied via launch URL. This is something that the LMS was handling for us, or if you're like a really tech savvy developer, you could get the data you need in the URL, but again, it required custom code. But now they have these JavaScript templates. Okay? And again, if you're brand new, we will get into this step by step, but these JavaScript templates, if we click on these three dots next to JavaScript, notice it gives us these three options for the actor. You don't need to understand the code, but this is what our actor object will be if we use one of these templates. So this gets filled in above those custom send xAPI statement triggers we're doing. This gets filled in, so it lets us add an actor object to our xAPI statement without having to get it from the learning management system. That's the big update here. And let's look at our options. So we can do a static mailbox, and this means every single person who goes through this course, they'll have whatever email address we put in here and whatever name we put in here. It's static. So 10,000 different people could take the same course, and every single person will have the same email address and same name. I'm not really sure why Articulate gave these options. When I saw this, I was excited. I'm like, I think I'll be able to put a variable in here, and then we'll be able to have the user enter their email address in Storyline and pull that data into this template, but it didn't work out that way. I played around with this for hours yesterday, and this code fires before your slide even loads in Storyline, and then it communicates that data to the LMS using some behind-the-scenes code. So even though I could update some variables and get them in here, they were not getting recommunicated to the learning management system. So this static mailbox one, not super useful unless you're okay with every single person going through the experience being identified in the same way. You won't be able to differentiate one person from the other. All right, let's check out static account. So notice with static mailbox, the way you're identifying people is with their email address. And this is just standard xAPI syntax. We have mbox and then that mail to email address. Okay, the alternative popular way to identify someone is via an account. The common example, and to identify them there, you need to have a home page. So what is the account for, and what is the person's name or handle? A popular example here is like, if you wanted to identify someone from their Twitter handle, the homepage here would be twitter.com, and then the name would be whatever your Twitter handle is. So in my case, it would be like devpeck is the name, and then it would just be like twitter.com. We face the same problem here though if we use a static account. This will be set for every single xAPI statement that gets fired from this learning experience, so every single person is identified as the same actor. Doesn't really make sense for us to do that. Okay? Now what we will use today and what will be well suited for our needs is this random account option. Okay, so now what this does is it still uses an account, so we can set a home page, and we would probably use like our organization's like URL, or we can use the URL for our learning management system if that's where we're hosting the learning experience, but it should be a URL that like your organization has control over. So that would be the home page, and then what the name is here is just random with like a series of numbers after it. But this is what we'll be using today. So for those of you who are already up to date on xAPI and wondering, what changed, this is what changed. This is what we'll be using. Because let me just give you another little taste of what we'll be seeing. Here we are in the LRS. You'll be able to see a data stream of how people are engaging with your learning experience. And you see this is the actor, like random 442, whatever it is. I'm gonna get back out of these publish settings. Actually, you know what? I'm going to publish it, and let's see what data comes out of a storyline project without us adding any of those custom triggers. Because right now, I don't have a single one of those send xAPI statement triggers in this learning experience, but by default, storyline will generate many of them. It's kind of frustrating because if you want to turn that off and you want to have full control over the statements that get sent, you will not be able to do so. Storyline doesn't let you turn off their default ones. Well, let's do this thing. So I'm going to publish for LMS/LRS. You don't have to do this. I'm just going to do it here. I don't need to report to a learning management system here because I'm just going to test this in my browser. But I do want to report to an external LRS. I'm going to dive into reporting and tracking. I'm going to go to that LRS tab. And okay, so we need to dive into this a little bit more here. So for actor, I'm going to go to JavaScript. I'm going to select those 3 dots. And I do want to set this to random account. Okay, so we do want that to be the case. We are going to use a random account to identify who our actor is. So that way, if we have 1,000 different people going through the learning experience, each one of them will have a different randomized username. So we can at least tell which actions belong to who, even if we don't know who that person actually is. Like they're still anonymous. Here's the other important piece here. So LRS configuration. So we obviously need to tell the learning experience where to send that data to. And the default option is that this information would be supplied at launch, because if you have an LMS with an LRS built in, or you've configured your LRS with your LMS, then it will be able to supply that information to the course for you. But in our case, since we're just going to test this in the browser, we don't want to rely on our LMS, or maybe our LMS is not very xAPI friendly, we will manually enter this information for the LRS. Okay, now if you have never used an LRS before, this may be a good time to get set up. You can go to lrs.io and create an account. Okay, I don't want to hold up the session here, so again, you can just watch how I do this. But once you are signed into lrs.io, you'll be on a dashboard like this, and you'll have the option to create an LRS. Okay? So we want to create one, and once you've created it, you'll be on a screen like this. All right, again, this is abbreviated. The replay will be available. This URL that you see right here, this is your LRS's endpoint. And there are many different LRS options. Veracity has a great free plan, and again, very developer friendly. So you'll need to look at your specific LRS documentation to get this information if you're using a different one, but we want to grab this endpoint. So I'm just going to click on this clipboard right here to copy it, and then we'll go back over to Storyline and we can paste in that LRS endpoint. So this is basically the URL where it's going to try to send the data. Next, it's going to see, okay, do you have the right key and the right secret to access this LRS? So that's important too. So once you've created it, it'll probably say like no access keys. So you can click on this, and then it will give you the option to create an access key. And it will give you, in Veracity's case, it will give you a username and a password. Okay, so it's up to you at that point to enter the username and the password over here in Storyline. And the key is the username, and the secret is the password. So I'm just going to enter mine here. And again, we went through this pretty quickly, but I'm sure most of you can figure out how to go to lrs.io and then just follow the steps I went through to create an LRS and create that access key. This is where all the data will get sent. Okay, so I'm just going to press OK now, and I'm going to publish this learning experience. Okay, so now we will view the project. And again, this is just going to open it up in my browser. This is locally on my computer, and this is still going to send out the data to the Learning Records store. So I'm going to go through this. So here we are on the home screen, xAPI 101. I'm going to select Begin. We're going to continue past this screen. I'm going to answer this question. xAPI statement must be included. I'm just going to say just something random. And then, okay, I failed. So I can restart, and then I'll begin again. I'll go through, I'll answer this correctly, and then object is the correct answer there. And now congratulations, I passed. So what we can do, once we've done that, is to access the data within one of our learning record stores, we would select this xAPI data option over here on the left, and then we would go to statements. Okay, because again, all of our xAPI data is made up, xAPI data is xAPI statements. They're synonymous. I mean, you can use xAPI in more advanced ways, but 99% of the time we're talking about xAPI statements when we're talking about xAPI data. So now we have all of these new statements in here for this random 5961146 and so on and so forth actor. So I'm going to scroll down and see where these start. Okay. And again, this is without adding a single custom xAPI statement. I wish there were a way to turn off these default ones, but there's not. So as soon as we open the learning experience, Storyline sends a statement saying we attempted the learning experience. This is the title. And for each one of these statements, you can click on this little drop-down arrow, and it will show you the full xAPI statement. You can see there we have our actor, we have our verb, we have our object. There's some additional data here. I've linked to there's like a really big guide I have. If you click like the Learn More button in this Storyline project I sent you, it will bring you to that guide. It gets really in depth, but we can see actor, verb, object. We can see the main ones that we need. There's some other data here we won't get too concerned with, but just know this is just like an abbreviated view of the xAPI statement, and you can even adjust this feed to determine which data gets shown in these columns. Okay, but yeah, we can see we attempted the experience. Every time you get to any slide in the learning experience, it will send a statement when you land on that slide. It will say you experienced it. And then when you go to the next slide, it will send a statement saying that you left the slide. The reason Storyline started doing this left statement is because if we expand this, we can see there's this duration property. It's a little hard to read, but I think of that PT as like period of time and then 10.9 seconds. So on these left statements, you can see how long someone spent on a slide, which is pretty interesting. Storyline's doing this out of the box. The data isn't the prettiest, and yeah, it's gonna fill your LRS pretty quickly. I mean, that's an exaggeration. This takes up such little data, and LRSs can hold so much data. It's not like you're not going to be super hurt on storage, but you're definitely going to be receiving a lot of statements if you have thousands of people going through a learning experience like this at once. But so every time someone lands on and leaves a slide, we get a statement. So that's 2 statements per slide already. You can see again, experienced and then left. They got a little bit out of order here, but I'm sure the actual, the timestamp is probably in the right order. I think this is sorted by when it's stored. Yeah. So if we sorted this by when it was actually performed, we probably wouldn't have this like mismatch. But there you see, we see when every time we experience and leave a slide, and then we see when we pass the experience overall. This is all out of the box. But notice we don't see the responses to the questions. But let's say we want to dive deeper here. Let's say we want to know if someone clicks on this Learn More button. Okay, and we're going to get into learning how to track the responses to questions too. But right now, if we click on this button, there's no out-of-the-box statement getting sent. We're not going to have any idea if anyone selects this button or this resource. So here's where we'll dive into creating the first custom xAPI statement. So if you want to follow along, this is where you can do that. Let's click on Learn More, and then let's click on this Create New Trigger button. Okay, so with that button selected, we'll create a new trigger. The reason we select the button first is because then the when is already filled out by default. It's already set to when user clicks Learn More button. The action we want to take is not jump to slide. We want to send an xAPI statement. So I just typed in xAPI to filter out all of those triggers, and then I will just click on send xAPI statement. Now you see the next thing you want to set up whenever you do this is the verb. So the learner experienced by default, I'm going to click on that verb dropdown, and I want to say that the learner viewed. So I'm going to say that they viewed this resource. Okay, so I'm going to select that viewed option. And then notice when we select this drop-down box, this is to set the object. Okay, so if we select this object drop-down box, it gives us a few different options. So we can say that the learner viewed a slide. It lets us choose which slide the learner viewed. We can change this tab to objects, and we can say that the learner viewed one of these objects that are on the current slide we're on. Or we can make it custom, and we can type in whatever we want to say that they viewed. Okay, so in this case, I mean, to keep it easy, we could say like they viewed the Learn More button, but we would probably want to do something a little custom here. So we would say that they're viewing. I mean, we can see it links to this resource over here. I have it open in my tab. So we can say that they viewed this tutorial. So send custom xAPI statements tutorial. So I'm just going to type that in this custom spot. I'm going to put custom text. I'm going to put send xAPI statement tutorial. Okay, so we need to fill in some extra details here. So once we've set that, once we've set these pieces, we have our verb, we have our object, we can click on this plus xAPI button to see how our statement is looking. We want to make sure it has all the pieces it needs. So we'll click on this plus xAPI feature. I'll have to click it again because it just set that. Now I have to click it. So we can see our verb. It finds the verb ID for us. So that's why it can be kind of handy, like using these built-in verbs that they show us, because it takes care of the ID piece. You don't even have to worry about it. For the object, again, we don't even need to worry about the object type. We can see that where we enter that information, it enters it as just like the name of this object, the send xAPI statement tutorial, which is correct. And the object ID, you'll notice as well, is made up of some variables. So it's taking the ID of the project as a whole, then the ID of this specific project, and then it's just randomly generating some characters to say, okay, this object now has this unique ID, because for each specific thing, we want that ID to be unique. In this case, and this may be slightly more advanced, but I just want to show like you can change these things. They're experiencing this web page, and this web page already has a unique ID. It's the URL right here. And that's what these IDs are in the format of. Like you see, they look like URLs. So since I already have an ID for this tutorial, I'm just going to copy this and paste it into here. And if that's confusing to you, no worries. I just want to show people who may be more experienced, like you can update these IDs if you have something better that makes more sense. So I'm just going to put the URL for this exact tutorial that we're saying that they viewed. That's the idea here. Okay, so that's all we need to do. I need to press OK. I'm going to press OK again. And now we can see we have this trigger here. Something I want to do, I don't know if this is necessary, but I want to make sure that statement gets sent before we get brought out of storyline. So with that trigger selected, I'm going to select this up arrow just to move it up in the stack. So that when someone clicks this button, the very first thing that happens is it sends that statement. And then the second thing that happens is it actually opens the URL. Okay, so now we can just test this. I'm going to publish this, quickly publish, and then I'm going to view the project. And if we go over to our LRS, I'm going to refresh this page here. We can see, okay, yeah, this random 171 now, we experienced the title screen. We're attempting the course as a whole. But when we click on this Learn More button, it opens this resource for us. But if we go back to the LRS and refresh it, now we can see that we've viewed send xAPI statement. Like let's expand this. So we can see this random account. They viewed, here's exactly what we just set up in Storyline. They viewed this object. Here's the exact ID that we just set in Storyline, send xAPI statement tutorial. Okay, so that is how we get the data, and this is just from our browser. You can upload this to a learning management system, to a learning record store. or not to a learning record. So yeah, an LMS as a scoring package or as an xAPI package, and we're still going to get this data using this approach. So let's see here. So we want to know how they're responding to certain questions. Okay, we're gonna get slightly more complex here. So I have a lot of xAPI content on my channel and website. Again, trying to cover a lot of ground in this session. So let's keep diving into it, and please ask questions if you're feeling lost or stuck. So which format do xAPI statements adhere to? Whenever the learner gets to this page, we're sending off that statement that they experienced xAPI question 1. And that's by default, and it gets that slide title from whatever we set our slide title to. So we already have a slide that includes that first question. So I'm going to click on one of these buttons. I'm going to click on the correct answer choice here, which is JSON. And this is just a rectangle with text in it. So very straightforward here. But I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to click this create a new trigger button. Okay. So we want to send an xAPI statement, not that the learner experienced, but that the learner answered. Okay. We want to say that the learner answered, and then which object do we want to say that they answered? So maybe this is a question for you all. Try to answer this. We could say something custom. We could say, oh, they answered like question 2. But this is something about xAPI is like, we're already sending a statement when they experience this xAPI question 2. We want to keep the ID consistent. Okay, so whenever, here, let me show you over here. So here we have it. Here's that statement I was talking about. This random user experienced xAPI question 2. And if we look at this object ID, it's something kind of, it looks really random to us, but it's generated by Storyline. But I might want to say, I want to see every single, like I might want to tell my learning record store, I want to see every single statement associated with xAPI question 2 in this course. How I would do that is using this ID. So this is kind of out of the scope of this session, but it's important to know when you're querying the learning record store, like when you want to build dashboards and reports and everything with this data, you'll be using the IDs to do that. So you want to make sure if you're talking about the same thing, you're using the same ID. If you're talking about 2 different things, you want to use 2 different IDs. That's kind of the idea. Each unique object should have its own unique ID. So in this case, since we're already saying they're experiencing question 2 and they're leaving question 2, we should use this same ID when we're saying that they're answering question 2. We don't want to just say, oh, they answered JSON, because then we don't have the context. They answered JSON to what? What was the question? Okay. So this is what I mean by we're getting a little more complex. We're going to say the learner answered this slide. And the reason that works is because we titled this, xAPI question 1. And sorry, I was getting caught up on question 2, but this is still question 1. So hopefully that explanation makes sense though as to why we're using the slide as the object. Because then Storyline, like if we go to plus xAPI, Storyline uses its like behind the scenes programming to give us that same ID as they use when you experience the slide. Now we're just saying that we're answering this slide, but the slide is a question. But, and some of you may be thinking about this now, and you can say, okay, now we say the learner answered question 1, xAPI question 1, but how do we know what their actual response is? Right, that's a problem. We're saying they answered the question, but that doesn't really give us much info, right? We can already do that with SCORM. So what do we need to do? And this is where it gets slightly more complex. We say each statement needs to have actor, verb, and object, but you can have some additional objects. I mean, they're called JSON objects. It gets even more confusing. Like this JSON object is called object. This JSON object right here is called verb. But we can also include one called result. All right, and I'm going to just show you this from one of the tutorials, or from the tutorial we linked to. This is like, these are some fields that the result object can have. So we can say whether or not they successfully, whether they completed this thing successfully is true, or whether it's a success. Like if someone answers something wrong, we can say that success is false. If they answer something right, we can say that success is true, just so we know if it's like right or wrong. This is if someone completed it successfully or not. And this right here is where you can hold someone's response. And this is why we're talking about the result object, is because the xAPI spec says, yes, you can have this result object, and within that result object, you can have this response key. And that response key can hold any data about the user's response. Again, it may seem confusing if you're brand new to JSON. After this video, if you're serious about learning an xAPI, watch a YouTube video or two about JSON, and this will all make sense. And then this is where you have that duration too. I know we looked at like storylines like left statement. So let me show you that again. So if we go and look at one of these statements where random user left this slide, notice there's this result object. So we have actor verb object, but we also have result, and then we have that duration property. So these are words and properties that are set and determined by the xAPI specification. For some, they say, yes, you have to have a verb object and it has to have an ID property. But then there are all these optional properties where you can, if you want, have this result property, and it can, if you want, have all of these, have all of these properties beneath it. So you can see you can include data about the user's score as well. We'll start simple and we'll just do the response. So I'm going to go back over to storyline, and you basically look at the indentation. Like we see this object starts here, the object starts here, and this bracket right here is closing that object. Again, will make sense once you study up on JSON for a few minutes. But we want to add a new object here, so I'm going to add a comma after that. Again, this is just JSON. I'm going to do a line break, and then I'm going to add this result object. So we include it within quotation marks. Again, JSON. This will be much clearer once you know JSON, but we're going to create this result object. To create the object, I'm going to open up the curly brackets, do a couple of line breaks, and then close the curly brackets. So now within this object, which is defined by these brackets, I'm going to do a couple of spaces to indent one of the children of this object, and we're going to call this one response. Response is within quotes, and then we can do a colon. Okay, so this is our key, and this would be our value. So whatever we want to set this value to, this is the data that's going to get communicated to the learning record store. So in this case, the response within quotes will be JSON. All right, so now that we've added this is proper JSON, this is proper xAPI. So when someone clicks on this button now, it's also going to have their exact response included with the piece. So I'm gonna leave this up for just another second, but I'll show you how this works. So I'm gonna press OK. We are sending this custom xAPI statement. I want to show you like you can name these custom xAPI statements. So I'll just name this one like question 1 choice A, and then I'll press OK. So send xAPI statement question 1 choice A when the user clicks JSON button. Perfect. I'm gonna press OK. Notice our trigger order. This is important. We add value 1 to user score. That's just a variable I set up to increment the user score every time they answer something correctly. But I want to make sure that we're sending this statement before we jump to the next slide. Okay, so I just have to notice when we add a new statement, by default, it will be at the bottom of the stack. If we jump to the next slide before we send that statement, this statement will never get sent. So I click on it and then just move it up so that it fires before jumping to the next slide. And I'm going to publish this very quickly. And then we'll view the project. I will begin the project. I'm going to continue through this info screen. And now I'm going to select the JSON response. Okay, if we go to the learning record store, I'll refresh this. I look for this statement right here, random user answered question 1. If we expand this now, we can see this result object and we can see their response. We know that they selected JSON. Okay, part of the power for this, which you may already be imagining, is you can go to the analytics here. You can build a dashboard where you can say, show me all of the statements where someone answered question 1 using this object ID, since it will be the same. Show me all of those statements and then create a pie chart based on the user's response. So you can see, okay, 60% of the people answered JSON, 25% answered this one. I just put random acronyms, but you can see the exact makeup for how people are responding to a multiple choice question. If you see that people are struggling, then you can use that data to either improve your question or improve your content. So good stuff there. We would do the same thing for these incorrect answer choices. So I'll just show you what that would look like. I'm going to select this send xAPI question 1 choice A trigger. I'm going to copy that using this button right here. I'll click on this incorrect choice and I will paste it. I'm going to double click this now to open it up. I'm going to click on the statement to edit the statement. I'm moving kind of quickly. Again, the replay will be available, but we're basically just copy pasting and replacing for those of you who know that approach I like to use. So I'm going to click on this now. Instead of naming it question 1 choice A, I'm going to name it question 1 choice B. The object is still the same. We're still answering question 1. The only difference is the response. So in this case, the one they're choosing is BMLL. And let me show you something else here too. I think you saw me mention that, oh yeah, so we can add this success property. Okay, so within storyline, I can just add a comma after the response property, and I can add this success property. And I can just set this one equal to false because this answer choice is incorrect, so it's not a success. And notice you can start sending score data too. Like we could include score data where we have the user's raw score, and that can just be equal to the user score variable. I see we're running out of time. We still have a little bit of ground to cover, but maybe I should just show you what that would look like for people who are a bit more advanced. So if we want to show the score as well, I can add this score property, and the score property is an object. So notice how it's indented even further. This one, again, it has those 2 curly brackets, so it's an object, and we can include the raw score, the minimum possible score, the maximum possible score, and even the scaled score. Each one of these properties is optional, so I'll just do like the raw score. So we can say score is, so I'll do a little indentation here. We'll do raw, and then a colon, and then notice we have this variables option. If we wanted to do this raw score, notice we have this variables option up here in the top of the xAPI statement editor. Okay, so if I click on this, and I go, and I have these built in, or I have these variables that I created in this project. So say I want to include this user score variable. So I'll select that. And now I'm going to press OK. People get hung up on this, and I got hung up on this. I'm like, why in the world is this not working? Okay, so you see, we did it right. Like we used Storyline's feature. We said, yes, include this variable. And then we try to press OK, and it throws an error. So it took me a little bit of playing around with, but it wants us to include our variables within quotation marks. So I've had people reach out to me before I dove into this, and they're like, hey, I can't use variables in my statement editors. What's going on with this? It's because we need to enclose the variables within quotes. Okay? So that's a takeaway here. When you want to include that dynamic data in the statement, put the variable in quotes. And then we can press OK and OK again. We can even copy some of that. Like if we want to have the raw score, I'm just gonna copy these pieces right here because I want to bring that into our correct answer choice xAPI statement. So I'm going to paste it in. Now in this case, success will be true because this is the correct answer choice, and it will show the raw score, which in this case, since right before firing this statement, we add 1 to user score, as you can see over there on the right. Now when we answer correctly, the raw score will be equal to 1 because it will read that variable from Storyline. And let me just show you the next question too. I want to get into this because this is also a really cool way to use xAPI is to collect this open text response data. SCORM doesn't make this really easy, but say you have a series of these open response questions and you want to see, or you want to ask these like qualitative questions and just get people's like actual words, like you want to hear from your people within a Storyline course, you can do that. So notice this is just a text entry box. Whenever it loses focus, we're setting Q2 response equal to whatever the user types in here. So very simple use case for a text entry box. And then when we press the submit button, we're adding 1 to the user's score if this is equal to object, because that's what the missing word is here. And then and then we also just have some programming to bring them to the pass screen if they answered both questions right, and bring them to the fail screen if they answered one or both of the questions wrong. All right, but let's see. So we need to send a statement here. So we're going to click on the submit button. I'm going to create a new trigger. We do want to send an xAPI statement. What do we think that the verb will be here for this xAPI statement? Answered. Yep, exactly. The learner answered. And what will the object be for this xAPI statement? The same object ID that is in the LRS? Yes, 1.4, this slide. Because we've titled this slide xAPI question 2, we already know when the user is experiencing this slide. Now we can see when they're answering this question. So very good. And then, yeah, the when is correct, when the user selects the submit button. But let's open up this statement now because we need to collect some additional information other than just they answered question 2. So we'll open up this statement. We'll change the name of it. We'll name it to question 2. That's fine, question 2 response. We can call it whatever we want. What do we need to add to this statement to get the user's response? What they answered. Yeah, but where do we put it? Do we put it here in the object somewhere? Result. Yes, we need to add an additional object. So we have verb, we have object. We're going to add a comma after the object to create the result object. So we put that within quotes. We'll create the object by adding these curly brackets. We'll open and close the object like that. And what goes within this result object? So we have the result object. What do we put in here? Success. We could do success, but that's a little tricky for this one. We could talk about why, Polly. Response. Yeah, response is where we will hold their response. Exactly. And how do we know what they responded? What do we type in here? Q2 response. Okay, good. Yeah, so we can go to variables, and we can say add variables, Q2 response. Exactly. That's where the user's text-based response will be held. And then remember, if we try to press OK here, it's going to say no can do. So we need to put this within quotes. Someone suggested adding that success property. And the reason for, this is tricky with this one, because if we say success is true, they might have input the incorrect response here. So what we could do is there are multiple ways we could do it, but one of the ways is we could say fire this xAPI statement if Q2 response is equal to object, which is the correct one, and then we can have it equal to true. And then we could have another trigger that says fire this other xAPI statement where this is equal to false if their response is not equal to object. So that's how you could use conditions with your triggers if you wanted to actually include the success here. We're not going to do that. We just want to see that we can collect this open response data for now. So I'm going to press OK. I'll press OK again. I will go to publish and we will publish this thing. So let's view the project. We will begin, continue. Let's answer this. Let's answer both of them correctly and see where we go. So let's answer them incorrectly. That'll be more fun. So we'll do that. And then the response will be like, I don't know the answer with exclamation points and submit that. Okay, we failed. No surprise. We didn't know the answer. But if we refresh our learning records store and let's see, we answered question 2. If we expand this, we can see the response, I don't know. All right, and again, it could be frustrating to have to expand this. Again, we can update this screen here. So if we configure this, look at this one right here. So notice this response option that's turned off. We could turn off stored and we can turn on response. And then we'll close this. And now, instead of having that timestamp over here, we can see their responses in this view here without having to expand the statement and read all that JSON object. Okay. But that's how we did it. Wanted to kind of show you what's possible with this update. Again, we didn't really have to do any custom code. You will need, if you're working with xAPI, you should know JSON. Again, you can learn it in less than 10 minutes and xAPI is built on it. And you can pick up more as you go. When you're working on this stuff, have resources open, like that link I used to learn more. Have that open. xAPI.com has good resources and references. The first year that I used xAPI, and honestly probably still now, I would always just Google. It's like, okay, I need to do xAPI work. Let's get the resources open. I don't have all this stuff just up in my head. Thank you all for coming, and I'll see you soon.